we're going to continue on the Shir Shirim series. We're reading from the Zera Shimshon. This is the 5th class in the series. We're going very slow, but nevertheless, we'll take time till we finish this chapter, and then we can come to a conclusion. I think it will take us another few classes. But very quickly to recap what we did in the last 4 classes, we're talking about the fact that when we received the Torah in Har Sinai, we didn't suffer from amnesia or forgetfulness. So whatever we heard, we knew, and we didn't need any interpretation of the Torah. Because we heard Hashem's voice, and the nation of Israel told Moshe Rabbeinu, the voice is too hard for us to hear. You speak to Hashem and then you tell us. And our sages explain that it brought down forgetfulness into the world, and since then we forgot the Torah. Later on, at the time of the golden calf, when Moshe Rabbeinu broke the tablets, then how it affected the world, that it brought forgetfulness into the world, and since then we don't remember the Torah. So we learn and we learn and we learn, but most of it gets forgotten, and not only that, then we need to explain. Before that happened, exactly like our sages, they would read from the Torah and understand it. They didn't need a rabbi, they didn't need interpretation. So this is in general what we're talking about, and we went through 2 different opinions in regards to the forgetfulness. Then we went and we explained also that the tablets were broken. The first tablets were broken because they were given in public. Everybody saw the auspicious occasion, and therefore the evil eye, the Ain Hara, had control over the tablets, and therefore they broke. The second set of tablets were given privately, in quiet, only to Moshe Rabbeinu, so there wasn't any Ain Hara, an evil eye, so the tablets didn't break. Then we went to explain about a certain Tana, Rabbi Yossi, that was a very great sage, that really knew the Torah, the oral Torah, inside out. And they were saying on him that he says the oral Torah like as if he heard it right straight out in Mount Sinai. And he explained that the only reason why he has such good memory is because he toiled. And we were concluding by saying that if a person doesn't toil in the Torah, they're not going to remember their Torah. And the reality is that most people will come to a Torah class, or they read a book, they don't remember what they learned. Very few people can remember very clear what was said in the class or what they read in the book. Some people need to read it over and over and over. So Rabbi Yossi was explaining that he was toiling in the Torah, therefore he had the merit to remember the Torah. Then we went to the fact that on Shavuot he would make a big feast, and he would eat a very special meat dish of like veal or a calf, a young calf, and he was explaining why specifically he has to have this meal. We were explaining that on the day of Shavuot, half the day has to be for Hashem in prayer and learning Torah, and half the day has to be celebrated for us. And how do we do that? By meals. In our generation they eat cheesecakes and many other dishes. But this Tana, Rabbi Yossi, was explaining he was making a certain meal, and he was explaining why. And we went a little bit explaining about the idea behind the meal. But nevertheless, we were concluding in the last class by explaining that there was a lawsuit against us in Shamayim. When we got the Torah, the angels filed a lawsuit in the heavenly court, complaining how come we humans getting the Torah, and the Torah should stay in the heavens. And of course, because there was a lawsuit, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu subpoenaed Moshe Rabbeinu to the heavenly court and told Moshe Rabbeinu, now you argue the case. What did Moshe Rabbeinu said? Let's read what it says in the Torah. It says in the Torah, the first commandment, it says, Ani anochi Hava Elokecha asher hotziticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am God, your God, that took you out of Egypt. So Moshe Rabbeinu says to the angels, were you in Egypt? Were you have to taken out of Egypt? We were taken out of Egypt. And then, to make a long story short, was going through one commandment after the other. Should honor your father and mother. Moshe Rabbeinu says to the angels, you don't have a father and mother to honor. You should not kill. You can't kill each other. You should not commit adultery. You don't commit adultery. Nevertheless, he went through the entire Torah and he started explaining, look how many rules we have when it comes to food. And I don't want to elaborate about it too much now. It can be found in the previous class. But if we're looking in the Torah, how much rules do we have with food? How much animals we're allowed to eat, not allowed to eat, when we're allowed to eat, who, when, how, what. Moshe Rabbeinu says, look how much the Torah is going in length about food. Do you eat? Dear angels, you don't eat. So the Torah has nothing to do with you. Obviously the Torah is for humans. I rest my case. We won the case and the Torah was given to us. So last week we were elaborating more about how much the Torah is going in length about has to do with food. And then we concluded last class that the main part of my connection with God is through physical mitzvot. Not by sitting on the floor and meditating on the greatness of Hashem, rather do physical mitzvot. That's how Hashem wants me to connect to Him. With physical leather to put tefillin on my hand, with physical wool and linen to put tzitzit on me, with the physical wheat and barley to make, or dough to make bread, whatever it is, has to be physical. Now we're going into Sukkot. Soon we're going to have to build a physical sukkah, a physical lulav. Everything is something physical. That's how Hashem wants us to connect with Him. And I don't want to go in length of what we concluded in last class, but last class we concluded the physical mitzvot. That's how I connect with Hashem. This is more or less where we left off. Now we're continuing. Is about the fact, about this meal that Rabbi Yossi used to do on Shavuot. And specifically he ate meat. Saying in other words that he didn't eat meat the entire year. But on Shavuot he had a meat meal. We know many other sages and many great rabbis up until our generation that they don't eat meat at all. Not because they're vegetarians, because many other reasons. But for example, we do know about the Baba Sali who wouldn't eat meat, but he only ate meat twice a year, on Erev Yom Kippur and on Pesach. That's when he had meat, and probably just a little bit. And many other great sages that wouldn't eat meat just on a special occasion. So same thing here, Rav Yosef had meat on Shavuot. What's the significance of eating meat on Shavuot? So he says as follows, "Verov ha'isurim sheba'u b'Torah l'inonei achila." Most of the prohibitions that we have in the Torah about food is specifically about meat. Hem al basar. Why? Where do we see it? First of all, yesh isur chelev v'dam. We're not allowed to eat certain fats. It's called chelev, and we're not allowed to eat blood. And where do you find the blood? In the meat. You don't find blood in a banana. So, of course, the majority of the prohibitions in meat. So the first one is chelev. Chelev is fat. Second of all is blood. We're not allowed to eat certain fat. We're not allowed to eat the blood. And especially, we're not allowed to eat meat that there's blood in it. Of course, I'm not talking about drinking the blood or eating the blood out of the vein, but also the meat has blood in it. And unless you take the blood out of the meat, you can't eat that piece of meat. Not only that, another prohibition that we have is called nevela. I'm not allowed to eat a nevela. Nevela is a carcass. Is an animal that died, even if it's a kosher animal. It can be a goat or it can be a sheep, but it died. And it's just lying on the ground. It's called a nevela, a carcass. I'm not allowed to eat it. It has to be slaughtered the right way. Also, I'm not allowed to eat is trefa. Trefa is an animal, a kosher animal, that was slaughtered but not according to halakha, or it was killed but not according to halakha. It's called trefa. And again, I'm not allowed to eat that. Also, there's a big difference between min tameh and min tahor. The Torah goes into length. What are the kosher animals? What are the unkosher animals? Not only that, I'm not allowed to eat the meat of this type of animal, but I'm allowed to eat the meat of this animal, and so forth. And there's a lot of signs, and there's also a masoret. Masoret is a word of mouth. Some of the signs were given in the Torah. As the kosher animal has to have a split hoof, has to have chew its cud, has to have both together. If it's an animal that just has one of them, it's not kosher, like a camel or the pig. Pig has a split hoof, but it doesn't chew its cud. Camel chew its cud, doesn't have a split hoof, and vice versa. Nevertheless, so the Torah gives me signs, but there are also a lot of animals that the Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe Rabbeinu, and he gave it to us. It's called a Mesorah. It came from one generation to the other. Nevertheless, what is kosher, what is not kosher? For example, we know that a giraffe is kosher. Giraffe is kosher, yeah. The only problem is we don't know where you slaughter, so we don't eat the giraffe. But the giraffe is a kosher animal. There's other kosher animals that we know they're kosher, but we don't eat them for whatever reason. Either like the example with the giraffe, we just don't know where do you cut. A very long neck. And also the different species of birds, and we know that these birds were allowed to eat, these birds were not allowed to eat. Some of them is written in the Torah, some of them were given to us by Moshe Rabbeinu. Not only that, there's also the chova. We have to slaughter the animal before we eat it, and a lot of the details of the slaughtering were given to Moshe Rabbeinu. When you learn halacha, there's a concept that is called halacha leMoshe miSinai. How do we know that? It was given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu gave it to Yoshua gave it to the elderlies gave it to the great assembly, Knesset HaGdolah, and then it went down from the generations, and a lot of the things, this is called halacha leMoshe miSinai. Not only that, we have another thing that we have to do. This is called melicha. Melicha is salting the meat in order to take the blood out. That's how you kosher the meat. As it says in the Shulchan Aruch, all the details how to do that. More than that, we have another prohibition. Look how many prohibitions, only about food and only about meat. Another prohibition that we have, it's called Gid HaNasheh. Gid HaNasheh is a displaced tendon in the leg. We're not allowed to eat that. We're not allowed to eat that. And we're also not allowed to eat meat that they didn't take this tendon out the right way. That's also another thing that needs to be done. And not only that, we have another prohibition. Oto ve'et bno. We're not allowed to eat the mother and the son at the same time. Can't slaughter a cow and the calf at the same day. Not allowed to do that. Nevertheless, we have also another mitzvah, another commandment to sacrifice animals. And not only that, a lot of it is not necessarily putting them on the altar. Some of them is just taking what's called the firstborn. Not allowed to take the firstborn. Firstborn has to do a pidyon. And also some of them we have to give maaser. Maaser is 10%. And there's so many other more prohibitions. We're not allowed to eat part of the animal while the animal is still alive. We're not allowed to mix meat and dairy. We're not allowed to eat from the sacrifices that is called kodashim, and the list goes on, and he adds here vechulu. This is only one topic about meat. Look how many prohibitions the Torah is coming to tell us. So first of all, just imagine this was part of the answer of Moshe Rabbeinu telling the angels, what do you want? Look how much the Torah is talking about things that has to do with us. How can you sue us? The Torah belongs in the heavens. The Torah belongs here in this world. Nevertheless, so it says here, very briefly, how many prohibitions we have in the Torah, prohibitions and commandments, just about food and just about meat. And we just went through some of them now. Then he continues, in the 3rd chapter of the Tractate Psachim, Perek Gimel de Psachim, Amrinan, it says, Sherak letalmid chacham mutar lechol basar. This can be found in Tractate Psachim, page 49b, and it says that only a sage is allowed to eat meat. In other words, a simple person is not allowed to eat meat. A person that is not a sage, a genius in the Torah, should not eat meat. He's not allowed to eat meat. Not shouldn't, is not allowed. What do we learn from this din? From this, where do we learn this law from? When our sages say something, they don't just throw something because they're in a good mood. They have to back it up with a source from the Torah. So where is our sages? In Tractate Psachim says that we shouldn't eat meat. We're not allowed to eat meat. So they quote a verse in the Torah, in the book of Vayikra, in chapter 11, verse 45. And it says, Zot Torat HaBehema, this is the law regarding the animals, the chickens, the birds, any animal that has a live soul in it, nefesh chaya. And not only that, also the animals that are in the water, haromeset b'mayim, ulechol nefesh hashoretzet al haaretz, and any animal that is crawling on the ground, and so forth. That's where they quote it. V'samichle, and after that, after this verse, comes another verse, verse 47, that says the word lehavdil, to separate. What do I need to separate from? Or really the translation lehavdil is not separate, rather distinguish. So what do I need to distinguish? Ben ha'taor or ben ha'tameh. I have to distinguish between an animal that is impure than an animal that is pure. ובין החיה הנאכלת ובין החיה שלא תאכל, and an animal that I'm allowed to eat and an animal that I'm not allowed to eat. So our sages have explained the words Zot HaTorah, this is the law, Kol mi she'osek b'Torah. Only a person that is dealing with the Torah, meaning that the Torah is his profession, that's the only person that is allowed to eat the animals. Which means a regular person that doesn't learn Torah, doesn't deal with the Torah, should not eat animals. This has nothing to do with you. Only a person that is profound and knowledgeable in Torah and mitzvot, that's the only person that is allowed to eat. Mutar lechol behema chaya ve'of. He's allowed to eat an animal, cattle, a chick, a bird, and so forth. That's what the Talmud says. So for the ones who follow this line, then you have here a good source where our sages say you're not allowed to eat meat. Okay? This is not what I'm saying. This is the Talmud saying. But nevertheless, let's see what's the reason for that. After all, everybody loves to eat meat. Let's see the depth and the reason behind why our sages prohibit us to eating meat. And only for a sage he can eat meat. Who? Now we're going to a book. The book is called Panim Masbirot. This is the name of the book, the name of the rabbi. And he says something here very interesting. Shebe'achilat habasar, when a person eats meat, mitrabe koach hayetzer hara begufo shel ha'adam. The power of the evil inclination is being empowered and stronger because of the meat. That's what it says. I'll say it again. Shebe'achilat habasar, when a person eats meat, mitrabe koach hayetzer hara. The power of the yetzer hara becomes stronger. Begufo shel adam, in the body of the human. Why? Ki habasar, because the meat, shu gufa behema, the meat is the body of the animal. You're eating a body of an animal. You know, really, when you're thinking about it, it's kind of disgusting. You're eating another animal. You wouldn't eat it when it's in your backyard. You know, when I tell my kids, sometimes my kid tells me, what is a steak or a hamburger? They tell me it's a sheep. It's a cow. Ooh, I don't want to eat a cow. Yeah, because it's an animal. So it says here, the meat is the body of the animal. And he continues, Mamshich, Mevi al ha'adam, it brings on the person the actions of Kama averot bedamo vegufo v'nafsho. It's increasing, it brings to the person to sin in his blood, in his body, and in his nefesh. That's what he says. Therefore, a simple person should not eat meat. I'm just going to go back for a second to explain a little bit on the commentary what he's saying here, that is very important. Because you know, I don't eat meat. No, not that I'm a vegetarian, I just don't eat meat. For many different reasons, and especially what the Torah says. One of the main reasons I don't eat meat is how the animals are treated in our generation, and how they're slaughtered, which I doubt that it's kosher. But nevertheless, this is another time to talk about it, but let's see what the Panim Masbirot, this is a commentary, says. It says as follows. V'yitachen shezeu hatam, could very much be that this is the reason shaya Adam HaRishon asur le'echol basar. By the way, you know, Adam HaRishon was prohibited in eating meat. Adam, and I don't like calling him Adam. His name is Adam. But nevertheless, Adam HaRishon was prohibited to eat meat. He was a vegetarian. It says clearly in the Torah, only from the tree in the garden you're going to eat. So Adam HaRishon was prohibited in eating meat. But later on, leNoach hutar. To Noach was permitted. Which means that till Noach was not permitted to eat meat. But why was Noach allowed to eat meat? The Noach lamad Torah, because Noach was a sage, he knew Torah. He learned a lot of Torah. Therefore, he was allowed to eat meat. Where do we find that? This can be found in Tractate Chulin, page 61a. Nevertheless, this is one part of the commentary. But another part of the commentary, what it says here about this is the law of the animal. ייתכן הכוונה כי אכילת בשר היא מרבה תאוות המשגל ומביאה עליו יצר הרע. When a person eats a lot of meat, it brings on him the desire or the lust of marital relations and brings to the person a lot of yetzer hara. Now, I know this might sound for you a PG-13 or rated R, but it still needs to be talked about. 99.9% of people on this planet, what's going on in their mind all day long is having relations with either the other gender or the same gender or many other things. This is the reality. If you would have some type of a device to read people's minds, you would see that that's what people think about most of the day. And that's what people are after all day long. People go to bars, hangouts, parties. I don't know, people don't go to bars to see the football game. They go to a bar because they want to meet a girl. Chas v'shalom, a boy. But nevertheless, I know it sounds that not nice. And I know some people say, no, not everybody. I didn't say everybody. I said the majority. There are some normal people that's not what's going on in their mind. But the majority of people in this world, that's what's going on in their mind. How can I find another person to mate with? Now, if it's done with a different gender, at least that. Half of this planet are looking for the same gender, which is completely distorted. But nevertheless, and again, it's not blaming anybody, but here he says something very clear, that when a person eats a lot of meat, it arouses the desire to have marital relations. Go on a meat diet, you'll see that this desire comes down. Put it to the test, I guarantee to you, you'll see huge difference. Not only that, it also mamshich alav yetzer hara. It arouses the power of the yetzer hara, not only for marital relations, but for other things, for many other things. That's it. And it says here, we're talking here about the difference between us and a sage, a talmid chacham. Al ken, am haaretz asur lechol basar. Therefore, a person that is not learned in the Torah should not eat meat. Why? Ki talmid chacham af al pi sheochel basar. That sage, when he eats meat, mevatel yetzer hara melibo. He knows how to cancel the yetzer hara. How? By learning Torah. He's actually able to elevate the animal. So when we are taught that when we eat meat, we're elevating the animals, when I tell people that we shouldn't eat animals, they say, yeah, but the Kohanim ate meat. Well, you are not a Kohen. You are far away from a Kohen. You're not even in the toenail of a Kohen. Why are you comparing yourself to a Kohen? And this is not David Kohen from the market. This is a Kohen in Bet HaMikdash. So why are you comparing yourself to a Kohen? So what if they ate meat? They knew what to do with the meat. They were able to actually elevate the meat. That's why the sacrifices, we're not allowed to eat from the sacrifices. It's actually one of the most severest sins is to eat from the meat of the sacrifices. So don't pretend that you are a Kohen. Don't say, oh, the Kohanim are eating. You're not a Kohen. He has the ability to do that. Nevertheless, the sage, the Talmid Chacham, he knows how to take the Torah and the meat and elevate it. We don't. Therefore, the conclusion here is that we should not eat meat. Now, to go back to what we were saying, he was saying that when a person eats meat, you eat the meat which is the body, the flesh of the animal, he brings on himself, mavi al adam, kama averot, a few sins, bedamo, in his blood. Now, how do you sin with your blood? You know that most people, and again, this is not to hurt people's feelings, most people, they have a lot of anger. And they don't know how to control their anger. Now in public, they'll behave nice and calm. But that's not how they behave behind closed doors. Sometimes you look at a person, you're saying, he's so nice, he's so calm. Well, go to his house at night when his kids are driving him crazy. You'll see how he's screaming like a maniac. Or somebody did something. And again, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. I'm just trying to bring out to the surface that we all have issues with anger. Some people, it's completely out of control. Well, a big part of the anger is caused because what's running in my blood. So when people come and tell me what should I do with anger, then I have a few solutions to them. One of them is, watch what you eat. Because when you eat a lot of meat, it will cause you to be angry. It goes into your blood, 100%. Now there's other things that will cause people to be very angry and have anxiety or being anxious. Now in our days is the smartphones, the strong radiation that causes people, I don't know how people are not, jumping out of their skin. It causes the person to be very aggravated, the radiation. People are very not calm, they're very anxious, a lot of anxiety, very strong anger. Because you're surrounded with radiating devices, antennas everywhere, cell phones, microwaves, and so forth. And of course, it's making the person angry. So this is a sin. When it's running in your blood, that's how you sin with your blood, with anger. And anger can cause a lot of problems. Not only that, it causes a few other sins with the body and the soul. Therefore, just to conclude, לכן עם הארץ אסור לאכול בשר. Then עם הארץ, a simple person, should not eat meat. Why? כי על ידי זה יתרבה עליו כוח יצר הרע ויחטא. And the story, because why? Because of that, the power of the Yetzer Hara will become stronger. The Yetzer Hara has the upper hand. What will be the result? Then you start sinning. That's it. You have a problem with your Yetzer Hara, put yourself on a diet. You'll see you put the Yetzer Hara on a diet also. Ma she'en ken, but nevertheless, on the other hand, Ma she'en ken ha-talmid chacham. But when it comes to a sage, that will not affect the person. Why? Shu osek b'Torah, because the person learns Torah all day long. And when I'm talking about a sage, I'm talking about a person, I don't think, first of all, we don't really have sages in our generation. I mean, we have a few amazing rabbis in our generations, but there are, not to chas v'shalom take from their status, there are nothing compared to the sages of the Talmud and many others. But there are rabbis in our generations that they're all day long, from morning to night, learning Torah. They live, breathe, sleep, and eat the Torah. So for them, it doesn't affect them. Why? Because they have the power of the Torah. And it says here, Shu osek b'Torah. Esek is a business. That all day long, that's his business in the Torah. And what do we know? HaTorah hu tavlin. The Torah is a spice. It's a herb. Sam merapeh. This is the translation for tavlin is a herb or a spice. But one can call it the curing medicine to the Yetzer Hara. It says in the Talmud, in Tractate Kiddushin, page 30b, Ve'en Yetzer Hara sholet b'mi sheyesh b'libo Torah. The Yetzer Hara cannot control you if you have in your heart Torah. As it says, the Kadosh Baruch Hu says, Barati Yetzer Hara, Barati Tavlin. I created Yetzer Hara, but I also created the medicine, or the word in Hebrew is Tavlin, like a spice, because the spices were medicine. How do you deal with the Yetzer Hara? Only Torah. You have a Yetzer Hara, learn Torah. He's still strong, add another hour of Torah. He's still pushing you to the ground, add another hour of Torah. So nevertheless, the medicine against the Yetzer Hara, how do you fight the Yetzer Hara? Only Torah. And when it says again, I'll just repeat it, Ve'en Yetzer Hara sholet b'mi sheyesh b'libo Torah. The Yetzer Hara cannot control a person that his heart is full of Torah. This can also be found in the Yalkut, in the Midrash Shimoni, where it says that a person that learns Torah and involves in the Torah all day long, the Yetzer Hara has no power over him. And therefore, lachen rashai lechol basar. That's why the sage, the Talmid Chacham, is allowed to eat meat. Okay, the rest, the next part is a little bit long. We're not going to be able to make it. We'll leave it for the next time. I know we went very short today. But we're just going to conclude here. We're not done. Like I told you, you have to go through the series. I know now we're stuck in the middle of the chapter and it's not so clear. Give it another 2-3 classes, we'll finish this chapter, we'll be able to conclude everything and then to understand. But nevertheless, even though we're going through a whole chapter, but we still like taking something out of every little class that we do. So especially now in Elul, when I need to put my Yetzer Hara on a leash, then we came to one conclusion out of many, that I need to find some type of a solution to my Yetzer Hara. If you don't realize that the Yetzer Hara is a big part of your life, if you have him under control, that's very good. Then you reach to a very good level. But I don't know many. I can only tell you about myself. I don't control my Yetzer Hara. My Yetzer Hara is a commando Yetzer Hara. Sometimes people tell me, I wish I had your Yetzer Hara. So it looks like it's so easy for you. I said, you can take my Yetzer Hara any day. You want, we'll switch. I'll give you my Yetzer Hara any day, even for a day. Take him for a few hours. My Yetzer Hara is a ninja. He's a commando Yetzer Hara. So, but I also have a Yetzer Hara, a very big one. He's a very sophisticated. After all, I trained him for 28 years. I fed him for 28 years with a lot of junk. So now it's backfires into my face. So I also have a Yetzer Hara. Everybody has a Yetzer Hara. David HaMelech was able to kill his Yetzer Hara, but that's David HaMelech. We still have a Yetzer Hara. If you didn't acknowledge yet that the Yetzer Hara is having you wrapped around his finger, then you're in big problem, in a big trouble. If you don't understand that the Yetzer Hara, if he just goes like that and he has you, then you have to understand that we in most cases are at the mercy of the Yetzer Hara. If the Yetzer Hara decides to go against me, he will crush me in a second. I don't care how black your suit is or how long your beard is. The Yetzer Hara has a lot more power on us. All it needs to do is a little bump and we're down on the floor. But nevertheless, I have to acknowledge who I'm standing in front of. And the only way to fight the Yetzer Hara, there's only one way, by the way. And you know what? One person has a Yetzer Hara with arayot, with forbidden relations. Another person has a Yetzer Hara with alcohol. Another person has a Yetzer Hara with gambling. Another one is theft. Another one is cheating. Another one is money. Some person is all of them together. But we all have a Yetzer Hara. Don't chas v'shalom for 1 second ignore the fact that you are pulled to different direction. Now there's no loopholes. There's only one way to fight the Yetzer Hara. It's only Torah. So if you learn once a week, you have zero power against the Yetzer Hara. If you learn once a day, you are starting to build up against the Yetzer Hara. And if your Yetzer Hara is driving you nuts, then still learn for 2 hours. And this is applying to women and men. Men are obligated to learn Torah, but if a woman has a Yetzer Hara, she can read Tehillim. Reading Tehillim is considered learning Torah. You can sit in a class now, you can learn halachot, the laws of Lashon Hara and Shabbat and Tzniut and Kosher. Women also have to learn. It's totally wrong that women shouldn't and not allowed to learn. There's no such thing. So women have to learn too, and if a woman has a Yetzer Hara, so sit and read Tehillim for half an hour. But the only way to fight the Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara will come in many shapes and forms. The Yetzer Hara is not only to steal. Yetzer Hara sometimes is the thoughts that are running in your mind and are driving you nuts all day long. Not to steal or to cheat or to... Sometimes your thoughts are bad thoughts. And you talk Lashon Hara with yourself and your thoughts about this person and that person. He did it, she did it. That's also the Yetzer Hara stirring a tuned pot in your mind. So the point to take from that is that there's only one way to fight the Yetzer Hara, is that only Torah. But there are certain things that you can weaken the Yetzer Hara. And here we got an asmachta, we got a stamp, an approval from our sages that says very clearly, you want to weaken your Yetzer Hara tremendously, then don't eat meat. And in our generation, I told you already, I'm not going to elaborate on that because we're done with our time. It's the next class now. But in our generation, I told you that, many other rabbis agree with me, I believe that 90, if not 95% of the meat out there is not kosher. Even though if it has all the fancy stamps on it, I don't go by the stamps. I don't trust any stamp. I just told you that 2 months ago, 50 ton, it's 50 tons, that's 50,000 kilos, were caught on trucks smuggled from Gaza with kosher meat on them. They were stopping the trucks looking for terrorists or explosives or guns or whatever, and they found 50 tons of meat with stamps on it. Kosher stamps. I don't think there's a kosher slaughterhouse in Gaza, by the way. So, and then it's all distributed into stores and into restaurants, and everybody eats it. Why? Because it has a stamp. Stamp means nothing. Nevertheless, It's very important because a lot of problems, health problems, mental problems, emotional problems, Yetzer Hara problems is coming from the food that we eat. And in our generations, one have to be extremely cautious. If you already want to eat meat, you have to make sure how was the animal treated before it was raised. Go look at all these. I have so many videos of undercover cameras going into all these slaughterhouses, how the animals are treated. They're mistreated, they're being tortured. That disqualifies the animal, by the way. The second the animal was mistreated prior to the shlita, I don't care if it's the best slaughter in the world. If the animal was mistreated and then before the shlita, the animal is disqualified for being kosher. Not to talk about right now what they feed the animals and then you eat it. And people buy it because it says on the cover, grass-fed. Wrong, no such a thing. You know what it is to find animals that are really grass-fed? They maybe are 20% grass-fed, 80% is GMO. To really find a farm that is 100% grass-fed, that's not so easy. So you have to also watch that. Don't think that the GMO that the animal eats doesn't affect you. It affects you in a very profound way. That's why there's so many mental and emotional and physical diseases in our generations coming from the food. Not to talk about the hormones that are injected to the animals, the antibiotics, and so forth. And then it comes to the shlita. How can you slaughter so many animals without messing up? So this is a big thing in our generation. I know many people don't like hearing it. Many people think I'm talking Lashon Hara about the slaughterhouses and so forth. It's not. Many great rabbis agree with what I say, and they preach the exact same thing. So in our generation, there's a very strong Yetzer Hara. I can guarantee to you, I can tell you from my own experience, move this out of your menu, you'll see a big change in your life, and you'll see how the Yetzer Hara is already squeezed a little bit. Besides that, you'll see a huge difference in your life. So I think this is a very good lesson to take to conclude from this class. And even if it's hard for you, then put yourself on a diet. You don't have to eat meat every day. So eat meat once every 2 weeks, once a month. Buy good quality meat. There are private farms that you can buy good cattle and good meat and go to a right shochet that does it for you. Okay, so you'll pay triple. But you have at least good meat. If you have to eat the meat. But you don't have to. Trust me. You don't have to. You don't have to. Also on Shabbat you don't have to. And I know a lot of people, there's a lot of arguments. I don't want to elaborate now because it's time for the next class. But nevertheless, a lot of people say, yeah, but you need the nutritions. There's no nutritions in meat. You know that a handful of almonds is better than 3 steaks. What you're going to get in the almonds, in a little handful of almonds, you get much more proteins and nutrition from the meat. Just to conclude, we have to put our Yetzer Hara under control, especially now in Elul where we want to do tshuva. And here we have a good tip how you put your Yetzer Hara under control. As the meat is te'ava, it develops a lot of lusts and desires and forbidden desires, and put it under control. Unless you hold yourself as a Talmid Chacham, then I welcome you to have barbecues whenever you want. I do not believe we have a Talmid Chacham in our generation. Maybe a few that you can count on our hand. Talmid Chacham, a sage, that the Torah is so part of them that they can actually take the animal and elevate the nefesh in the animal. There are other ways to elevate the nefesh of the animal and many other things. B'ezrat Hashem, we should merit to really do tshuva, real tshuva, and put our Yetzer Hara under control.